rebels may have been killed in fighting around the airport out there as they tried to capture the airport. They control the surrounding area. The shoot down of this helicopter using a manpad shows that these rebels have gotten some fairly sophisticated equipment. You and I, when we were in Congress, we were always concerned that terrorist organizations would get this kind of equipment. It looks like they've either captured this from an arms depot from the Ukrainian government, from the Ukrainian military, or that this equipment may have been supplied to them by Russia. All things that point to this violence is going to continue, and it's pretty interesting to see a rebel group with this kind of sophistication being able to hold off what should be a relatively good military capability with the Ukraine military.
And speaking of the Ukraine, their situation now following the election, an incoming president where the Ukrainian military, for all intents and purposes, appears to be standing up to the pro-Russian cells within the country and, for that matter, to Vladimir Putin. Is the Ukrainian military capable of snuffing out these pro-Russian sympathizers or quelling the rebellion within its borders? And what does that portend for Mr. Yeltsin sending in regular Russian troops?
I think, number one, I don't think the government has the Ukrainian government doesn't have the capability to take down these rebels at all. I think they'll have an air advantage and those types of things. But I don't think they're going to be able to take them out. Remember, this is a pro-Russian part of Ukraine. It's going to be a guerrilla tactical type of fight, and I don't think the Ukrainian military is going to be that good. You're not going to see Putin sending in Russian ground troops. So he may send them some more special operations folks, some training, and some more sophisticated equipment, but I don't think you'll see Russian troops on the ground.
Pete, another story out there that we need your expert analysis on, and that is the report out of Syria that an American was behind the suicide bombing in Syria this past weekend. You've heard the reports. In your mind, are these reports credible?
I think they probably are credible. It is unusual, but there have been American suicide bombers before. There were at least 3 American suicide bombers in Somalia back in the area, the time frame of 2011. There have been confirmed reports of a number of Americans and Europeans in Syria. I think there have been some Europeans who have offered to have been performed suicide bombings. So I'm not surprised that there's a report of an American suicide bomber. I think the real question here is, and you've seen this in Europe as well as what's going on in Europe, and now it's a concern to the United States, as these fighters from Europe and the U.S. are engaged actively in combat in Syria. What happens when these people come back to Europe and when these people come back to the United States? They're going to pose a whole kind of new threat to our security internally that we've got to worry about.
It certainly adds a new dimension to the whole notion of our immigration policy and allowing visas and allowing people to leave and return to the country. Here's something interesting, Pete. We have apparently a picture that is making rounds in the social media, officials looking into to pictures of this bomber, but you say again, and we have it up on the screen right now. So it's a curious situation where social media, Facebook, may be doing the work for us, at least claiming the identity of the, quote, martyrdom operation in Idlib. So you've got that on Facebook right now. That adds an entirely new wrinkle to this whole spectacle where you go out, apparently commit the crime and or commit the act of war, and then ta-da, there you are on Facebook and other social media. Can we expect more of the use of the social media to proclaim these, quote, triumphs of the Islamo-fascists?
Oh, I think so. I mean, they've had this, and they've been using social media for, quite some time. They've had their magazine Inspire. I think the first edition of that came out in 2009, 2010. I'm not sure exactly how many editions they've already published. But, that was if you look at it, it looks like it was professionally done news piece, and it was especially done for the internet. And it was especially targeted at the U.S. This Facebook posting, it does two things. It gets their message out. It will also, I think, relatively quickly enable us to determine whether this is really an American, whether it was someone who was a U.S. citizen, someone who had resided here for a short period of time, went back to Syria. But no, the Al-Qaeda and its affiliates are relatively sophisticated at using social media to promote their message and talk about their accomplishments.
Pete, American officials say they're concerned about the recruitment and training of Americans by terrorists. Deputy FBI Director Mark Giuliano says, and I quote, "The recent flood of militants into the country poses a serious challenge, as these individuals could be trained to plan and carry out attacks around the world." So, in your opinion, Pete, domestically, the FBI and other American intelligence apparatuses here in the country doing enough to finger these people as they come back and forth from these shores to their overseas postings, if you will?
I sure hope so. I hope this is one where we've totally torn down the walls between foreign intelligence and domestic security, domestic law enforcement. We need to know who's in Syria, who has traveled there, and we need to make sure that local law enforcement knows when they're coming back. And, there's a real question here is when you've got individuals that have been fighting in Syria, perhaps fighting in groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda, what are the legal responsibilities and the legal options for us to deal with these individuals when they come back in the United States?
Pete, as if that were not enough, a report on Frontline from PBS the other night about the U.S. backing training of Syrian rebels in Qatar. Let's listen to a little of this.
Their camp is in an area that has been under attack from the Assad regime. The commander of the group, who only agreed to talk if we didn't use his name, says his is one of a few moderate rebel factions that have been getting covert support from the United States.
American agents got in touch with us. They had researched us from the beginning. They had intelligence on us about all our work. They wanted to know our political leanings, or whether we had any connections with extremist groups.
So, Pete, popular consensus, I think most of us knew this was happening, but now we've seen it. And most of the weapons they're receiving are Russian-made, but Frontline also reported that these rebels are getting U.S. weapons, another bit of that program.
It appears the Obama administration is now allowing select groups of rebels like them to receive U.S.-made anti-tank missiles, known as TOWs. Many of the fighters have filmed themselves firing the missiles.
So, Pete, we hear that information. Your take on the Syrian rebels getting Russian arms, getting American arms, and United States involvement with these rebels?
I think what we're going to see on the northern border of Israel is another Libya. When they say they've been asked whether they have any ties to extremist groups and those types of things in their background, they're going to tell us exactly what we want to hear, which is exactly what happened in Libya. And we ended up arming a whole bunch of folks and training a whole bunch of folks that, number one, threw over Gaddafi, and number two, then turned their training and their equipment onto the United States. And I believe that one of these days we'll find out that the people who attacked us in Benghazi probably used weapons that were supplied to them by the United States, not necessarily U.S. weapons, but weapons that were supplied to them by NATO.
And that is something that has been widely reported, possible weapons deal there. We'll have to stop right there, Pete Hoekstra. We look forward to having you back in the program a bit later. Don't you go anywhere. America's Forum continues after this.